So you mentioned a couple of times about the different stages in relationships. Could you talk a bit more about what those look like for couples and how couples move through them?
Well, first of all, not all couples move through them. Many couples will take up residence in a certain stage and homestead there, so to speak, and stay stuck there. But the first stage, which is effortless, is me-centered. I mean, it's not very hard to be me-centered.
And I said it's all about me and everything that I want. And if you have two people in a me-centered stage, and the relationship is me-centered, they're both out for what they want for themselves, and there's not very much cooperation at all. They're usually battling and accusing the other one of not, being there and doing what they need, or being defensive.
And transitioning from me-centered to the we-centered stage is usually is accomplished through enough suffering having happened. Because the me-centered aren't about to see what they're up to and go on and get past it. They're wanting more to milk that stage for all they can get out of it. It's very narcissistic. When you have two people playing at that level, they're not going to get out of it without some outside quote-unquote help, some jarring events, some suffering increases. Then most of us end up having enough suffering so we will make that shift. And then we're we-centered, but we usually begin we-centered codependent. We get stuck. And we all know what codependency is. And that's inevitable, that stage. We are more comfortable, but we're not quite so me-centered now, but we're stuck. Our addictions fit the other person's.
And it can be a cult of two, where everything is about the couple and the relationship without much input from the outside.
Which is the we-centered state.
We-centered, codependent, yeah.
So you're we-centered now, like you're giving some importance to the we space, but within that we space, both people are too dependent on each other. They're codependent. So it's, I would call it a cult of two. And there's a coziness to it, and there's often a flattening of energy in that too, because they've given up sort of the wildness at the me-centered stage, except perhaps in their dreams now and then. They've given that up, and there's a certain comfort, because the other person can be dependent upon to play a certain role. But there's not enough risk.
And that's when people can get into being really super nice with each other, Mr. and Mrs. Nicey Nice. where they don't want to rock the boat, so they keep it just, it's all about let's make the relationship really good, but we're not gonna challenge, we're not going to take risks, because we want to make sure that we keep this cozy nest secure.
And both people have given up a lot of their autonomy. They had more in the we-centered stage. They could be more wild, irresponsible, party more. And now, the next stage is where they become co-independent. Instead of being codependent, they're still we-centered, but now they're co-independent. So it's as if they've separated out, they're standing apart more, they have their autonomy, they have more independence, but they don't have more intimacy. But at least they can see each other more clearly. They have a little more focus. Because the previous stage, the people are in so close, they're so fused, they cannot see the other person clearly. They have not expanded their boundaries, the codependent ones. They've collapsed them. Now the co-independent have reformed boundaries, but they're more separate. I'm over here, I'm bounded, she's there, she's bounded. And there's a little bit of overlap for things like sex, but it's not that connected, but at least there's some movement. The people at that stage are already starting to work on themselves. They're developing a relatively healthy autonomy, they just take it too far.
The autonomy becomes more important, actually, than the intimacy of the relationship. They still have the relationship, but it's a bit too separate.
But there's all, and in that stage, there's already intimations of what comes next, which is what we call being-centered, which is where both people have expanded their boundaries to include each other, and they can get very, very close, they're connected, there's a natural integrity, there's an ease, there's a tremendous ease, and there's a sense of deep, deep trust. Deep trust.
And transparency.
And a willingness to admit when the earlier stages show up.
Yeah.
So
As they will.
As they will.
And they will.
And it's not a problem when they show up.
Yeah.
So being centered is...
And being willing to be busted by your partner in that, and not to go into defense about it, but to recognize it and go, oh, okay, let's work with this. big difference.
That's where the trust then comes in,
Mm-hmm.
the deep trust.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, there has, and of course, in order to get to that, you have to have safety within that relationship. So when a couple's in the being-centered relationship, there's respect, there isn't the name-calling and the blaming, there's clean anger that's expressed. It's not aggressive, it's not hostile, it's not to take down the other person, it's heart-centered, it's heart anger, and there's clean fire. Of course, you know, if a person's really stressed and really tired, they can revert back to something for a moment, but that's not their general stage. They can get in a state and then they clean it up, you know, when those things
So it's
happen.
the stage where real intimacy takes root.
So that's what you mean by mature monogamy.
Yes, yeah, that is part of it. But in that, see, genuine intimacy is now not something that happens now and then, it's the core.
Mhm.
It's
The
the ground,
constant.
and it's very common. And see, for real intimacy, you have to have enough distance you can focus. If you're in too close, you can't see.
Mhm.
Enough closeness to connect. So there's this dance between separation and connection that is occurring. And there's clear boundaries, but my boundaries are more including her.
They're expanded to include
And
the
at
other, but you
times,
maintain yourselves.
they can be deliberately dissolved.
Mhm.
Not just for sexual reasons, but just they're dissolved because they can reform like that.
Mhm.
So I don't lose myself in Diane, but I can surrender into our usness. And then that surrender leads me into an even bigger usness, which is sacred space. And at that point, where there's an intimacy with what I call the beloved. She becomes beloved, I'm beloved, and it's magic. And we're also two separate beings at the same time.
Mhm.
So there's that incredibly exquisite dance of being very close, separate, then even closer. And it evolves, and we all have a longing for it. And it's not like you just can say, oh, it sounds good on paper, I want to sign up, I want to do it. We arrived at this after a lot of work, and a lot of messing up with previous partners, relationships, a huge amount of learning.
Yeah.
Huge. So when we met, we already had done so much of the work,
Yeah.
and we know what it takes, and it's like,
But we also continue to do the work,
Mm.
continue to work really hard, and had some big things come up here and there that were hard. But we were so knowing that we were totally committed, and that it wasn't something that was going to break it. It was just like, okay, here's this place we haven't worked on yet, and this is it, and we're doing it. And then each time, it would go deeper. And it's like, wow, I didn't know it could get deeper, but it did. And we know there's still more for us to learn, still
That's
more
what I
for
was
us to
gonna
work.
ask, is are you still doing the work?
Oh, yeah.
the work does us.
Yeah, eventually the work
And
does.
another sign of this is, and we didn't plan this again, is with a being-centered relationship, which is I think where we're mainly established, there's a natural urge, not urge, but drive or impetus to let what we have touch others. Not in some egoic manner, look how great we are, but it's natural. So when we're working, our relationship is part of the process.
I think it's really almost a responsibility.
Yeah.
When you have that, you know, because it's such a gift to be able to say, okay, you know, it's real, and you can have that, you can work
It's like
through
the
that.
prayer, like, may I be with a partner through whom we both can serve the higher good of all. Not just ourselves, it's not just for us, and we're also not being foolishly altruistic. But there's an energy that emanates from being connected as we are.
Well, it's more about that we can serve in a greater way by being together than if we were both separate serving. You know, there's something about
Like
the
synergistic.
combination.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I prayed for. I mean, I didn't know we'd work together. I thought it meant that by the love that we had, the energy, you know, that vibration, that would be serving. So it was really kind of tickled me to find out that this is what we were ending up doing.
Well, it's a demonstration of that anyway. When you work, there's a pure demonstration of how you work together and what you do. It's evident that you're in that stage, or state. Actually, it's a state.
And there's room for all, and there's times where we both slip, and when that happens, it's an occasion, okay, here we are, we get to work with this.
We bust each other and we bust ourselves. You know, either one or the other or both.
Because I don't feel like I'm moving toward any sort of sainthood. I mean, it's, Nope.